Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. As you can see, again, we are without Shara, so we'll probably just make some stuff up and get you on your way. But um, we're gonna keep following along this plan we've made and keep talking about work and employment. And um, we've talked about the benefits and the importance of work on your mental health and being productive. We've talked about some barriers and things that make it difficult for people to work and keep consistent employment. um, the downsides if you aren't being productive or working, and how that can impact your mental health. So if you're interested in those kind of topics, check out our last couple videos. But today I think we wanted to talk about one, maybe some wise words that we have heard regarding work and some things that we've learned. And then also maybe some interventions and things you can try to uh, have a healthier work-life balance and manage that to the healthiest state you can. Does that sound right?
Yeah, but hold on, because I want to throw out the first question this time.
Okay.
You always have good questions.
I don't know if they're good, but I always just you guys want to start?
I think they're great. But we were talking before we started filming about some of maybe the generational differences between attitudes or
Yeah.
mentality towards this concept of work and how work is changing. But you fall almost like perfectly in this mix between old school patterns of thought and like this new younger pattern.
Sure.
So I'm curious, like, what are your thoughts on work, and what's kind of like, do you have like a guiding principle?
That's a good question. I I honestly think like I'm really grateful for being born the time I was. I was born in 1995. In case anyone's wondering, wants to do the math, I'm 28. But um, because like as a kid, I didn't have like cell phones and YouTube and Netflix, right? I just played with my toys and had like that experience of being outside a lot and those kind of things. But by the time I was like from a kid, I was like in my house watching Toy Story on the VHS. But by the time I was in high school, I did have a cell phone and we did have streaming and I did have a smartphone. You know what I mean? So I
Hmm.
kind of experienced like all of that all at once. I kind of saw both parts of childhood, I guess.
Uh-huh.
Um, and so I don't even know like maybe technically which generation I fall under.
Sure.
I'm either a really really young millennial or like a really really old like Gen Z, I guess. I don't
Uh-huh.
know.
Sure.
Anyway, so I think I have like maybe a combination of those perspectives, but um, I don't know. I think that like we've talked about maybe on the last episode of the previous one, I definitely have like a mentality of like you've got to be doing something. Like I've always had a job since I was like 15, and um, I changed jobs a lot when I was a teenager. I had no commitment. I would leave jobs after a couple months. Like I wasn't the world's greatest employee, I'm sure. But I do believe in the importance of like working. I think you need to work. I think it's good for you. I think it helps teach you lots of lessons you might miss out on otherwise if you're waiting for the perfect job or something like that. Um, but I also am a big believer in like making your job into what you want it to be. Um, so maybe that combination of like a traditional, you need to work. I think it's important. I do really believe that. But also maybe less traditional of like, if you have an idea and you want to pursue that, go do it. Right? Go try. Why not? You know what I mean?
So that's not necessarily the 9 to 5 mentality that
No.
comes from being the older generation, right?
Right. I think I don't know. I don't want to work 9 to 5 for my whole life. I currently don't work 9 to 5 right now. I probably should, but yeah, I think that I don't know. I think you can have both.
Sure. Yeah, it's just interesting, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm going to throw something out here about your life. We've had this as a conversation, and I might botch some of the details, but one of the things that stood out to me is um, when you first hired on here to do therapy with us at the practice. When you start out doing therapy, you don't have a full caseload, and so you were like, "Man, I'll do a day here, a day there." But one of the things that struck me is at night you were delivering pizzas. Now I'm sure there's some necessity for that,
Sure.
right? Like
Yeah.
if you're not generating a bunch of income from your primary employment, you got to do it. But um, yeah, it's almost this work mentality of like, well, if I got to deliver pizzas, even though I have a master's degree, I'm going to do it. And you did. And so that's why I say you kind of fall in this interesting, I don't currently work 9 to 5. That's not what I want to do with my life. But you're not shying away from delivering pizzas at 8, 9, maybe even 10 o'clock at night.
That's my weekend activity.
Yeah, you know. So it was really cool. Like, you just have that work ethic. So, okay. So one of the things we talked about was like guiding principles for, like a principle that guides our idea of work. You were sharing something earlier. I'm curious, what's yours? Or at least the importance of work, right?
Yeah. I think I was having a conversation once with my uncle, and my aunt had just finished her PhD and was teaching at a university here. And I was talking to him. I was like, oh, that's something I potentially be interested in. I'd like to teach. Maybe I'll go get my PhD. I've thought about it before. But I was like, but that's a lot more school. I've already done a lot of years of school to get my master's degree. I don't know if I really want to commit to 4, 5, 6, 7 more years of doing that.
Sure.
After being in school for 6 years. And so I was asking my uncle what it was kind of like, because she went to school with 4 kids who were in their teenage years, high school, all the way down to like elementary, like 9, 10, 11 years old. And she did that, and she would go on the weekends out to once a month to Idaho, because she was going to Boise State, and do the rest online, I think. Anyway, and so I really admired that, and I was asking him about how that was, and he said, well, if it's going to take you 8 years to finish school, 8 years from now will still be 8 years from now, whether you're done with school or not.
Uh-huh.
And I always think of that as like a really good model for, I don't know, achieving goals, working towards goals, or trying new things, or just working in general. Right? I can say like, we've talked recently, like outside of the podcast, about like saving for retirement and stuff. Like, I could wait around and find a job that's going to like do a really good like retirement matching, or like 401k matching or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And that would be awesome. Or I could just start now, right? Because I'm going to want to retire, and either in 30 years I'll either have a retirement or I won't.
Sure.
Whether I start now or I start in 5 years, or I started 5 years ago. And so same thing applies to work, right? Like, I think you can wait around for the perfect job, or you can just go make some money, because you're either going to be sitting making $0, or you could make $10, even though you'd like to make 20.
Sure. I remember my dad sharing an experience somewhat similar to that, with a buddy of his saying, hey, 10 years is going to go by. Do you want to be doing this in 10 years, or do you want to be doing something different? So it's kind of cool to not lose sight of that. Yeah. How do you think that has played a role in your professional career up to this point?
It's a good question. I don't know. I think I always benefited because I was always working. I worked while I was in college, which helped me get through college without having student loans, which I'm glad for. I'm really grateful for now. In the moment, did it suck? Yeah, quite a bit, but it was doable. And I don't know. I always had like a sense of security, right? I knew I wouldn't leave a job without having another one. Might have been you that told me, like the Tarzan analogy, right? Like, you never let go of the vine until you grab the next one, right?
Sure.
Yep. But also like helped me like try lots of jobs, I think, and figure out what I really want to do. Because if I didn't want to do a job, I didn't just quit. I was like, well, I guess I got to find something else. And I was willing to try new things, and I also wasn't scared to quit doing those things and move on to something else.
Okay, that's fair.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Just kind of mentality of like, be doing something, and even if I don't like it, that's okay. I'll just do something else.
So how would that apply to maybe, like when I think about it, I'll share a statistic here in a minute from a research piece that was done. But some of the barriers to work, which I think what we're trying to do is ask people to shift the mind frame of it, right?
Yeah.
That working actually will help with your mental health rather than get a great mental health and then work. But how would this apply, or how would you share that with people who might be struggling mental health wise and struggling with employment? How would that guiding principle work for them.
Yeah. Like we talked about in those previous videos, we talked about the benefits on your mental health of work, but that doesn't mean that it necessarily is right for everyone to go jump into like a 60-hour week job. I don't think that's probably good for anyone to jump into a 60-hour week job.
Yeah.
But necessity dictates it sometimes for people, I think. But I would say, like, I always think of it like stretching, like learning to stretch, right? I'm not very flexible, and if I wanted to become flexible, I would have to be uncomfortable for a certain period of time. But if I bend over to start touching my toes, and the second it hurts, I stop. I'm never going to become flexible. I have to hold it there for a little bit, and so maybe your mental health is in a place where working 40 hours a week is just maybe not feasible for you right now or something. And maybe you have the luxury of, or the benefit of not maybe needing that much money at the time. But if maybe you can work a 10-hour a week job or a 15-hour a week job, right? And that's hard and that stretches you. It's more beneficial to do that, I think, than the other way around where we're waiting for our mental health to get better so we can then start working a 40-hour a week job. We might have to stretch a little bit, get a little bit uncomfortable, but just like stretching a muscle or stretching your legs, over time I'll be able to stretch farther and farther and farther until I get to the point I want to be, and maybe that is a 40-hour a week job.
Because at some point those 5 months, 6 months, year, 5 years, 6 years is going to pass, your guiding principle. And so if I'm stretching a little bit for the next 6 months and stretch it probably will have benefit to my mental health.
Yeah, and I think just like I think you talked about this in the last one where you said something along the lines of like someone wasn't taking any job because they wanted to take a job that paid so much money.
Mm-hmm.
So they ignored a job that maybe paid less, so they were making $0, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of that same thing. Like, yeah, would it be... I think it is good for our mental health to work, but if we're waiting until our mental health is better, a lot of times that doesn't come without some discomfort, right?
Sure.
Even looking at it from a therapy perspective, right? So a lot of the things you ask people to do in therapy are uncomfortable,
mm-hmm.
and you challenge some uncomfortable thought patterns and maybe encourage them to do some things that are uncomfortable for them, but that's how we progress, right? And so sometimes I think you have to take that same approach with work and say, yeah, maybe I don't want to work at a shoe store, right? That wasn't my end goal, but I did work at a shoe store for like a year and a half through high school, and then another year after I got home from my mission. Did I love working like a holiday until 11 o'clock at night and then being back to open the next day at 7? Not at all.
Sure.
But it was really uncomfortable, but that helped me stretch and grow. Was I going to do that forever? No. But it enabled me to be in maybe a mindset where I could be more likely to achieve what I really wanted to do.
Okay, so here's the real question. Are you still delivering pizzas?
I don't deliver pizzas anymore, no. I delivered pizzas until New Year's Eve. New Year's Eve last year was my last day delivering pizzas.
Okay.
So I did that on the weekends for some extra cash while I was building a caseload. And I had the added pressure of we had just had our first baby, so I was like maybe a little more motivated because of that.
So your statement earlier was sometimes necessity dictates that, right?
Yeah. And so I kind of needed to be making more money. I didn't want to keep living on my credit card. So I kind of used that pizza job to pay down my credit card that I had been living off of.
Sure.
And then I figured I'd stay till New Year's. That'd be a good time to be like, hey, I'm done. But also, I thought that it'd be busy and I'd get good tips, which I did.
I was going to say, you ended probably on like a kick butt day.
That was my best night, for sure.
Yeah. I mean, I think about what I eat on New Year's Eve. It's always pizza.
Yeah. And some people maybe had been partying a little too much and probably gave me more of a tip than they were planning to originally. Yeah. But who am I to say no?
Right. Yeah. It would be not kind to just tell them no, right?
I'll allow them to be generous.
So that kind of jumps into one of the thoughts that's kind of been a guiding principle for me that I'll share. But then I'm more interested in sharing the statistic because I can see my guiding principle being extremely unpopular too, right?
Okay.
Hey, Jaden here. Thanks for watching our video today. Please stay tuned for part 4 and our final part of this series.